At 217 in the morning, the buzz of the air conditioner in the apartment was like a tireless bee, weaving fine white noise under the ceiling. Lin Yan stared at the densely packed club planning proposals on the computer screen, his temples throbbing. His fingers mechanically slid the mouse, but suddenly froze when he saw the 4 words, sponsorship and investment. The line of song font reminded him of the embarrassment of buying on credit at the convenience store last week. The balance of the campus card in his pocket was probably less than the rain in the Sahara Desert at this moment. The moment the phone vibrated on the wooden desktop, he jumped up as if he was electrocuted. The moment the screen lit up, the girl in a pink sweater in the lock screen wallpaper smiled with curved eyebrows overlapping with the word husband that popped up in the chat box, making his heart skip a beat. Husband, I'm so tired from the meeting today. I miss you so much. The voice message had a sizzling sound like electricity, but the tail tone was like melted caramel, sticky and entangled on the eardrum. Lin Yan took off the headphones too hard, and the ear hook pulled a red mark on the earlobe. He put the phone to his ear and repeatedly rubbed the play button with his index finger. It was not until the 3rd time that he noticed the faint sound of high heels in the background. The sound was as crisp as ice cracking, and it was surprisingly similar to the sound of Liu Ruyan stepping on the marble floor in the library in his memory. Damn, Lin Yan, are you horny? A sleepyhead suddenly popped out from the upper bunk, and his roommate Akai held up his phone and grinned. Are you being affectionate with your girlfriend again? When will you bring her out to meet us, so that we can see what a soft girl who can fascinate you like this looks like? Lin Yan hurriedly turned off the screen, and then realized that he was still smiling foolishly. He grabbed the pillow and threw it at him, but suddenly felt guilty when he met Akai's playful gaze. How could Liu Ruyan, who was turning the tide in the business world of Hong Kong City, the heir of the Liu Group who was called the Icefield Rose by a financial magazine, be the soft candy on social software with pink bunny ears and chasing him every day to act coquettish? My thoughts drifted back to the rainy night 3 months ago. At that time he had just finished the student union meeting and was running back to the dormitory in the rain. The screen of his mobile phone was blurred by the rain. He opened the social software for some reason. As he swiped left and right, a dynamic with a cat sticker attracted him. Rainy days and hot cocoa are more suitable. The girl in the picture was holding a mug with water droplets on her eyelashes, like an elf just out of a fairy tale. It's so late and you're still not asleep. Who are you waiting for? After sending the message, he stared at the rain curtain outside the window in a trance. His fingertips crumpled the receipt of the convenience store in his trouser pocket. That was his dinner tonight, 2 cold rice balls and a can of expired yogurt. Just as he was about to close the software, a reply popped up in the dialog box. Waiting for the destined person, are you? Followed by a winking expression, with the corners of his eyes curved like the crescent moon at the beginning of the month. Maybe. My name is Lin Yan, 30 years old, the president of a small company. The moment he finished typing, he wanted to bite off his tongue. Why would a 22-year-old poor student pretend to be a boss? This lie was even more outrageous than the lines in idle dramas. But the other party replied in seconds. Wow, Mr. President is so awesome, which made him continue to make up stories. Until 3 o'clock in the morning, the two of them actually chatted about funny things in the workplace. Across the screen, he made up the intrigues in the board of directors, and she shared the embarrassing incident of a colleague spilling coffee on the report, and finally added, it would be great if you were here, you would definitely help me solve it. At this moment, Lin Yan looked at the new photo sent by Xiao Yan on his mobile phone, and his throat suddenly tightened. The girl in the photo was wearing a white off-shoulder dress. Her collarbone glowed like pearls under the warm light, and the silver necklace around her neck was exactly what he bought at the night market last week. At that time, he held the 300 yuan he earned from working, wandered in front of the stall for half an hour, and finally gritted his teeth to buy this thin chain engraved with the letter Y. Stupid! Aren't you afraid of being targeted by bad guys for exposing so much? His fingertips trembled as he typed, and the screen reflected his red ears. But it's really good looking. After sending it, he added immediately. But when he saw the other party's reply, only my husband can see it, he suddenly slammed his phone on the plan. The cold light of the computer screen reflected his hot face, and the sound of rain outside the window gradually increased, mixed with the hum of the air conditioner, weaving an ambiguous web in the silent night. The crystal chandelier of the Harbor City International Hotel cut the banquet hall into countless diamond-shaped spots of light. Lin Yan's leather shoes stepped on the Italian imported carpet, and the muffled sound was like a heartbeat. He tugged at the collar of the custom-made suit that Lin Feng had forced on him, and always felt that the 5-digit fabric made his neck itchy. Just like his current situation, he was obviously a poor student who had to apply for student loans for tuition, but he had to pretend to be a rich man in the upper class. Don't look at it, or I'll call the police. Lin Feng's teasing interrupted his thoughts. Lin Yan was shocked to realize that he had been staring at the entrance of the hall for a long time. He hurriedly picked up the champagne glass to cover it up, but was stunned when he touched the cold wall of the glass. The temperature was very similar to Liu Yuan's fingertips. Last week, the club co-organized an event. She spoke as a representative of the sponsor. When she shook hands with him after the event, her fingertips were just as cold, but she gently tapped his palm before letting go. Liu Yuan is here. Lin Feng's elbow hit his ribs and hurt. Looking up, he saw a woman in a black fisted skirt taking off her mink coat at the entrance. Her long hair was tied into an elegant low bun, revealing the graceful back of her neck. The broken diamonds on her earrings swayed gently with her movements, like stars falling in the snow. The corners of her lips drooped slightly, the tails of her eyes were raised, and her makeup was cold and beautiful, completely different from the Xiaoyan, who smiled silly at the plush toy on the phone. Lin Yan's fingers suddenly clenched the champagne glass, and her knuckles turned white. He saw her talking in a low voice with the manager of the banquet hall, and her slender index finger tapped on the list handed over by the other party. The manager immediately nodded and bowed, trotting to adjust the seat. This scene reminded him of the voice message sent by Xiaoyan last night. Husband has scolded a stupid subordinate today. Will the fierce scare you? At that time he smiled and replied, Xiaoyan is the cutest, but now he only felt a chill on the back of his neck. I heard that she just poached a financial genius from Wall Street, and the annual salary starts at 8 figures. Lin Feng's voice was mixed with the sound of ice cubes hitting the wall of the cup. But no matter how powerful she is still a woman. Sooner or later, she will find a man to take her, and hey, what are you in a daze? Lin Yan didn't hear what he said, and his eyes were fixed on the small mole behind Yuan's ear. The mole was light brown and shaped like a crescent, exactly the same as the position exposed by Jian Yan when taking a selfie. He remembered that 3 days ago when she was video chatting, she tilted her head towards the camera and said, Honey, look at my newly dyed hair. As the hair fell, the small mole flashed on the screen. He smiled and said, It looks like a small moon. But now he felt that it was a mark of fate, quietly connecting people from 2 worlds. The phone vibrated in his pocket. Honey, socializing is so boring. I really want to hear you talk. The voice message was accompanied by the background noise of the banquet hall, but it couldn't hide the soft and sticky ending. Lin Yan looked up for some reason, only to see Liu and looking down at her phone, her fingertips tapping quickly on the screen, but the corners of her lips raised a curve that he was very familiar with. That was the little pride she had every time she sent a coquette this message and waited for him to coax her. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. Liu raised her eyebrows as slowly as a close-up in a movie, and the eyelashes at the end of her eyes cast a fine shadow under the light, overlapping with the way she lay on the bed and shook her feet in the video. Lin Yan felt like a ball of soaked cotton was stuffed in his throat. He wanted to escape but found that his legs were filled with lead, until she stepped on 10-centimeter high heels and walked in front of him step by step. The cedar scent mixed with the faint sweetness wrapped him. Lin Yan. Her voice was half a degree lower than usual, with the majesty of a strong woman in the workplace, but it was slightly raised at the end, like a feather sweeping past his ear. Lin Yan heard Lin Feng gasping beside him, and saw the gossiping eyes of the socialites around him, but he could only stare blankly at her lips painted with bean paste lipstick opening and closing. Why, don't you plan to explain to me? The tone was very similar to the "It turns out that men are all pig trotters," she sent last night, when he forgot to reply to the message while playing games. It was a coquettish scolding, but at this moment, it turned into the sharpest knife. The whispers in the banquet hall came like a tide, and Lin Yan felt countless eyes piercing his back, which was more difficult than being stared at by the professor during the final exam. Yui and calmly took out her phone from her handbag. When her fingertips slid across the screen, he saw that the "good morning, baby" message he sent in the chat interface was still marked as unread. It turned out that she had known for a long time that he was lying since the first video call, but she accompanied him to play a play for 3 months. Boss Liu, Boss Liu? She interrupted him. Her voice suddenly softened, and the tail tone was long. Did my husband forget me so soon? The sound of the champagne glass breaking was particularly harsh in the silence. Lin Yan was shocked to realize that he had held the glass too hard, and the sharp glass fragments cut his palm, and blood seeped into the cuffs of his suit. Yuan exclaimed, took out a silk handkerchief and pressed his wound. Her movements were gentle but with unquestionable strength. Just like the last time he moved a table in the club and hit his foot, she was anxious across the screen. Come with me to the lounge first. Her tone was the decisiveness of a workplace superior. But when she lowered her head, she said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Stupid, does it hurt?" Ming Yan looked up into her eyes, and there was a flash of heartache, which overlapped with the Xiaoyan in the phone who stayed up late to revise the plan for him. He suddenly remembered that she once said, "I have known since I was a child that I have to fight for what I want." At this moment, she held his hand, and the warmth of her fingertips came through the handkerchief, reminding him of those nights when they stayed up late to chat, and she always said, "I don't feel tired when talking to you." As soon as the door of the lounge was closed, Liu Yuan removed the cold frost on her face. She leaned on the leather sofa, covered her red ears with both hands, and muffled her voice in her palms. Lin Yan You knew I was lying a long time ago. He smiled bitterly, opened his palms and let her treat the wound. You recognized it from the first video, right? She nodded, her fingertips trembling gently in his palms. Grandpa showed me your photo and said you were. He swallowed the words before she finished speaking. She looked up at him, her eyelashes casting fan-shaped shadows under the light. But I want to see how you will greet me. Lin Yan looked at the whorls on the top of her hair, which were the small curls that he wanted to reach out and mess up every time he video called. Thinking of how he had winked at the camera to pretend to be mature, saying, "Did Xiao Yan miss me today?" He felt his cheeks burning at this moment, which was more embarrassing than being criticized by the professor in public. "Why don't you expose me?" he asked softly. Yuan paused while treating the wound and dropped the gauze very carefully because you look cute when you lie. Her voice was as light as a feather, and I want to know, do you like me as a person, or do you like the illusion of jelly candy? The sound of fireworks suddenly rang out outside the window, and the orange light shone through the blinds, leaving fine light and shadows on her face. Lin Yang looked at her focused on bandaging, and suddenly remembered her signature on the social software. May someone accompany you in your wanderings? At this moment, he finally understood that those late-night confessions and those clumsy lies were the courage of two only hearts to get close to each other in the vast sea of people. Actually, he started, but she pressed her lips with her fingertips. She looked up with the reflection of fireworks in her eyes. Don't say it now, wait until we are all ready. Her phone suddenly vibrated, and the screen lit up with a call from Grandpa. Yuan answered the phone and instantly regained her own of a workplace elite. "Grandpa, I'm dealing with some small things." "Yeah, Lin Yan is here too." She turned her head to look at him, and a smile rose at the corner of her lips. "We'll be out in a while. Don't worry." After hanging up the phone, she stood up to adjust her skirt, but when she passed by him, she gently held his hand. "Let's make it clear first, you have to cooperate with me when you go out later. After all," she raised her eyes, "we are now a couple in love." On the 7th day of the first lunar month, the port city after the snow looked like a handful of broken diamonds. Lin Yan stood in front of the carved door of the Liu family's old house looking at the red couplet, "Happily Ever After," posted on the door. His fingers unconsciously stroking the USB flash drive in his pocket. It contained the Liu Group campus recruitment plan that he had worked on late at night. This was the first step he could think of to get closer to Liu. "Are you Yan's world? Yan Yan is here. Come in quickly, your grandpa. You just made some Minki on Long Jing tea." The one who opened the door was Uncle Chen, the housekeeper of the Liu family, with a cunning smile on his face. Lin Yan followed him through the corridor and heard the sound of chess pieces dropping from the study. Yu Yan's grandfather Li Mingyuan was playing chess with his grandfather. The black and white pieces on the chessboard were interlaced, just like what the two were thinking at the moment. "Sit down, the two youngsters can talk about theirs, and we old men can do ours." Grandpa Yu pointed to the Huang Hu Ali armchair next to him. As soon as Lin Yan sat down, he saw two photos on the desk. The left one was a group photo of him eating at Liu's house when he was 10 years old, and the right one was a solo photo of Liu, Ruyan at her 18-year-old coming-of-age ceremony. In the middle of the two photos, there was a small crystal photo frame, which contained a screenshot of his chat with Xiaoyan, husband. "I saw a super beautiful star today and I want to watch it with you." And Grandpa Yu said, "We have seen what happened between you and Xiaoru for a long time." Lin Yan's back straightened instantly, and cold sweat broke out on his palms. He remembered that Liu Yuan said on WeChat last night, "Grandpas want to match us up, don't be nervous." At this moment, he felt that the air in the whole study was hot, and even the tea fragrance was tentative. "Xiaoru is a cold child on the outside, but warm on the inside." Lin Yan's grandfather sighed. "When her mother left, she lived in our house for 3 months with a pillow in her arms, waiting for you to finish school every day to do homework together." These words were like a key, opening the gate of Lin Yan's memory. He remembered that when he was 12 years old, Liu Ruyan stood at the door of his house in morning clothes, her eyes swollen like walnuts. But she still stuffed him with the pocket money she had saved for half a year. "I'll buy you a tutoring book, don't tell Grandpa that I cried." It turned out that since then, she had been expressing her concern in a clumsy way. "Our Yu family is missing someone who can make Xiaoru laugh." Grandpa Yu suddenly made a move and laid a piece of the other party's black piece. "You are a sincere child." In order to buy a birthday present for Xiaoru, you secretly went to work in a convenience store and burned your hand on the coffee machine without telling him. "Grandpa." The door of the study was pushed open, and Liu Yuan walked in wearing a camel-colored cashmere coat, with snowflakes on the ends of her hair. She glared at the two elderly people who were smiling kindly, then turned to Lin Yan and said, "Don't listen to their nonsense. Let's go for a walk in the garden." Lin Yan followed her across the 9-curved bridge. The ice on the lake had not completely melted, and several black swans were swimming in the remaining snow. Yuan suddenly stopped and took out a piece of fruit candy from her pocket and stuffed it into his pocket. "Strawberry flavor, you used to love it the most." The candy wrapper made a crisp sound in the cold wind. Lin Yan looked at her nose tip that was blown red by the wind, and suddenly remembered that in high school, she always secretly stuffed candy into his school bag when he stayed up late to do homework, and there would occasionally be a small note on the wrapping paper. "Don't be too tired. You are the one who wants to get the first place in the exam." In fact, they had planned it a long time ago. And looked at the lake, her voice torn into pieces by the wind. "I know that you secretly went to accompany Grandpa in the hospital last year." Lin Yan's hand shook, and the candy almost fell into the lake. He recalled the rainy night when Liu Mingyuan had a heart attack. He ran to the hospital in the rain and stayed outside the intensive care unit all night. The next day, he went to class with dark circles under his eyes, but met Liu Yuan in the corridor. She didn't say anything, but just stuffed him a box of lozenges. "So you downloaded that social app and deliberately matched me?" he asked softly. She nodded, and the broken diamonds on her earrings shook. "I want to see if you will recognize me, and I also want to know." She turned to look at him, with snowflakes falling on her eyelashes. "Does your love for me have nothing to do with my identity?" The black swan on the lake suddenly let out a long cry, startling the snow on the thin ice. Lin Yan looked at himself in Liu Yuan's eyes, remembering those nights when he smiled foolishly in front of the screen. And remembering that she always stayed up late to chat with him in order to accommodate his time, even if there was an important meeting the next day. It turned out that all coincidences were the clumsy but brave intentions of a girl. He took out a USB flash drive and stuffed it into her hand. This is the plan I made for you's campus recruitment, although I am just a poor student now. But stupid. She interrupted him and put the USB flash drive into her coat pocket. I never cared about those. She took out a small box from another pocket, which contained a braided bracelet, and the color matching was exactly the exclusive color of his character in the game. For you, clumsy, don't get hurt again in the future. When the bracelet was worn on his wrist, Lin Yan smelled a faint cedar scent on it. That was the smell of the hand cream she often used. The laughter of two old people came from afar, and the battle on the chessboard must have been settled. He looked at Liu Yuan's profile illuminated by the snow light, and suddenly realized that some fate had been written in the years and could not be changed by lies or identities. On the day he moved into Liu Yuan's apartment, Lin Yan looked at the limited edition figurines on the wall and felt like a little beast that had accidentally entered the castle. Liu Yuan poked her head out of the kitchen in an apron, with a Hello Kitty hairpin on the end of her hair. She was like a different person from the female chief referee who made decisive decisions at the board meeting this morning. Why, Annie, come and try the sweet and sour pork ribs. I just learned it. Are you sure this is not a dark dish? He raised his eyebrows and looked at the charred blocks on the plate, but when he saw her expectant eyes he bit the bullet and took a bite. It's charred on the outside and tender on the inside, very creative. She immediately smiled with dimples, her eyes curved into crescents, and reached out to poke his forehead. If it's obviously unpalatable, don't force it. I ordered takeout, it will be here soon. Then she took off her apron and threw it on the sofa, revealing the pink home clothes with a bear pattern on it. But this is the first time for this president to cook. Can you give me a favor and finish it? Lin Yan watched her pick up a piece of pork ribs and stuff it into her mouth, her cheeks bulging like a little hamster, but there was a mischievous light in the corners of her eyes. He suddenly remembered that in the video last week, she wore the same home clothes to show him the new succulent she had raised, and said this pot is called Yan. It needs to be watered every day to grow up. At this moment the real person was right in front of him, more vivid and cute than the screen. He reached out and drugged her hair for some reason. Okay, I'll listen to the president's wife. When the takeaway arrived, the two were curled up on the sofa watching Tom and Jerry. Liu Yuan hugged the pillow and curled up in his arms, poking his abdominal muscles with her fingertips from time to time. Yan, can you accompany me to pick out a dress tomorrow? There is a charity dinner the day after tomorrow. No, Lin Yan deliberately teased her. You screwed me over at the last family dinner, and now the whole school thinks I'm hooking up with a female president. She looked up and glared at him, and the top of her hair rubbed his chin. It was you who lied to me first. Before she finished speaking, she suddenly reached out and pinched his face and shook it left and right. Besides, isn't it natural for a boyfriend to accompany his girlfriend to attend an event? Lin Yan was grimacing because of her pinching, but his heart softened when he saw the uneasiness in her eyes. He remembered the way she sat alone on the press conference stage in the financial news, and the tired movements of her occasionally rubbing her shoulders in the video. He suddenly held her hand and put it on his lips and kissed it lightly. Go, of course. But he raised his eyebrows. I want to be your male companion, not your bodyguard. You and earlobes instantly turned red, like ripe strawberries. She hurriedly lowered her head to poke open the takeaway box, but laughed out loud when she saw the sweet and sour spare ribs inside. Lin Yan, look, the spare ribs in the restaurant are similar to the ones I make. It's really similar. He picked up a piece and put it in his mouth. But he leaned close to her ear. Yours is sweeter. The red on her ear tip quickly spread to her cheek. She grabbed the pillow and threw it at him, but he caught it. A stuffed toy fell out of the pillow. It was the little bear with missing ears that he gave her. There was a small sign hanging around the little bear's neck, which read, given by Yan. Don't lose it. At night, Lin Yan was lying on the big bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling in a daze. There were soft footsteps next door, followed by the hum of a hairdryer. He remembered that when he helped her pick a dress just now, she was standing in the fitting room wearing suspenders. The butterfly bones on her back were faintly visible under the light, and she was wearing the silver chain he gave her around her neck. A small bell at the end of the chain rang lightly with her movements. The phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from Liu or Yuan. Why, Annie, I'm actually a little nervous. I used to go to such occasions alone. He turned over and sat up with the phone in his hand, looking at the night view outside the window. The neon lights in the distance were reflected on the floor two ceiling windows, overlapping his shadow with hers. His fingertips tapped quickly on the keyboard. Don't be afraid. I will always stand by your side. After sending, he stood up and walked to the door, knocking gently on the door of the next room. When Yuan opened the door, her hair was still dripping with water. She was wearing his white shirt, which was long to her knees, revealing her slender calves. Can't sleep, he asked. She nodded, twisting the hem of her shirt with her fingers. Well, I'm afraid of making a fool of myself tomorrow. Lin Yan reached out to brush away the wet hair in front of her forehead and touched her hot forehead. No, you are Yuan, and you shine no matter what you do. He paused, took out a piece of fruit candy from his pocket and stuffed it into her mouth. Strawberry flavor, you won't be nervous after eating it. She looked up at him with the candy in her mouth, and there was a tiny light in her eyes, like grapes soaked in honey. The next second, she suddenly tiptoed to kiss the corner of his lips. The movement was as light as a butterfly touching the water, but it made his blood rush to his head instantly. Good night, Yan, she said softly, retreating back to the room and closing the door. Lin Yan stood there, touching the corner of his lips that she had kissed in a daze. The night lights in the corridor stretched his shadow very long, but could not hide the corners of his mouth that were raised. The phone vibrated again. It was a message from her. In fact, I have been ready for a long time. Just want you to coax me. He smiled and shook his head, replying, little liar. The screen quickly popped up a reply, little liar who only deceives you. The night wind outside the window rolled up the curtains, bringing a hint of coolness. Lin Yan felt hot all over, thinking of her appearance in a white shirt, thinking of the temperature when she kissed him, and suddenly realized that some things had changed unconsciously. The illusion that was once separated by the screen was now taking root and growing in his life in the most real way. The venue of the charity dinner was decorated like a crystal palace. Yuan wore a dark green velvet long dress with a long skirt that dragged on the ground, outlining the beautiful waist and hip curves. She stood on the spiral staircase, her earrings swaying gently with her movements, and the silver chain around her neck cast a fine shadow under her collarbone, overlapping with the girl in Lin Yan's memory who was wearing a sweater and eating rice balls. Yan, come up. He reached out her hand to him, with the braided bracelet he gave her on her wrist, which glowed softly under the light. Lin Yan took a deep breath and stepped onto the stairs. When his hand fell into her palm, he heard the sound of people sucking in cold air from the audience. The most mysterious female CEO in Hong Kong was smiling at him at this moment, and that smile contained the cunning and tenderness he was familiar with. Are you nervous? She asked in a low voice, and her fingertips gently tapped his palm. Not nervous. He looked at himself in her eyes, because you are by my side. She raised a smile at the corner of her lips, turned to the host and said, Next, my boyfriend and I will jointly reveal tonight's auction items for everyone. There was an uproar in the audience. Lin Yan heard someone in the front row whispering, Who is that boy? I have never seen him before. I heard that President Liu turned down the marriage of Luo's group for him. He clenched Liu Yuan's hand, felt the warmth of her fingertips, and suddenly remembered what she had said. I never do anything I am not sure of except that I like you. When the auction was halfway through, Liu Yuan suddenly stood up and walked to the front of the stage. Today, I want to temporarily add an auction item. She signaled her assistant to push a tray covered with red cloth. This is my favorite toy when I was a child. It accompanied me through many lonely times. Starting price. 1 yuan. The moment the red cloth was unveiled, Lin Yan was stunned. It was a cloth bear with no ears, which was the one Liu Yuan held when she first arrived at the Liu family. The little bear was wearing a pink sweater with a small Y embroidered on the cuffs. The bidding sounded one after another from the audience. and it was finally sold to a real estate tycoon for $1 million. When URUYM returned to her seat, tears flashed in her eyes. When I was a child, I always felt that if I hid the things I liked, I would not lose them. Later, I realized that some things can only be shared to gain more worth. Lin Yan held her hand and gently kissed her fingertips. Now you have me. You don't have to hide anymore. After the dinner, the two sat on the rooftop to enjoy the breeze. URUYN took off her high heels, stepped barefoot on the marble floor, and looked up at the starry sky. Yan, why do you think people always have to live with masks on? He looked at her profile illuminated by the moonlight, and remembered how she was dealing with the directors at the meeting during the day, and how she was tired when she rubbed her eyes and said, I had an 8-hour meeting today. In the video, he reached out and took her into his arms, letting her head rest on his shoulder, because they didn't find someone who could take off the mask. She chuckled and drew circles on his shirt with her fingertips. What about you? Do you regret seeing my true face? Of course not. He lowered his head and kissed the top of her head. I like you who can cry and laugh. Act coquetous line show off under the mask. She suddenly looked up and looked at him with burning eyes. Lin Yan, I like you. It's not because you are the marriage partner. It's not because you are good to me. It's because you make me feel that I don't need to be a CEO. I can just be an ordinary girl. The night wind rolled up her hair and brushed his cheek. Lin Yan looked at the stars in her eyes and remembered the rainy night 3 months ago. The girl on the screen smiled and asked him, Are you? At this moment, he could finally say what was hidden in his heart without hesitation. I like you too, from the first time I saw you. I like you so much that I am willing to go through all the lies and misunderstandings just to hold your hand. Her eyes suddenly became moist. She put her arms around his waist and buried her face in his arms. The city lights in the distance were bright, like a handful of diamonds scattered in the night. Lin Yan held the girl in his arms, feeling that a certain empty place in his heart was finally filled. It turns out that the best love is not a perfect masquerade, but two hearts willing to be honest with each other, and be the most authentic self in each other's world. 2 weeks later. Late at night, Lin Yan was awakened by the vibration of his mobile phone. When the screen lit up, he saw the message from Liu Ruyan. Yan Yan, come to the company quickly, I need you. The message was sent half an hour ago, and the location was shown at the headquarters of Liu Group. He grabbed his coat and rushed into the elevator, his heart beating so fast that it seemed to jump out of his chest. He remembered the strangeness in her voice when she called in the afternoon, saying, I have to deal with some urgent matters tonight. He was busy with his thesis at the time, and only hurriedly said, be careful. At this moment, every minute and every second was like a stretched rubber band, making him breathless. The top-floor conference room of Liu building was as bright as day. When Lin Yan pushed open the door, he saw Ruyan sitting at the head of the conference table, with a pile of documents in front of her. Her face was as pale as paper, but the corners of her lips were tightly pursed, and her eyes were iron and stubborn that he had never seen before. Opposite her, several men in suits and leather shoes were arguing fiercely, one of whom was Shang Ming, the financial director of Liu, who was respectful to Liu Ruyan at the charity dinner last week. Boss Liu, I'm afraid it's hard to convince others with your arbitrary behavior. Shang Ming's voice was threatening. Why don't we see how your little boyfriend can help? Lin Yan then noticed that there were other people in the conference room, including Liu Ruyan's assistant and several senior executives from the legal department. Liu Ruyan looked up at him, her eyes wavering for a moment, but soon replaced by determination. Yan, come here. He walked over to her and saw the documents spread out on the table. The financial statements of the Liu Group, in which the flow of funds for several projects was circled in red pen, and next to it was a photo of Zhang Ming and senior executives of a rival company. The truth was obvious. The financial director embezzled and transferred company assets. Director Zhang said that I abused my power to suppress my subordinates. Liu Ruyan's voice was terribly calm, but she trembled slightly when she held Lin Yan's hand. Now everyone present needs to vote to decide whether to sue him. The conference room was filled with discussions. Lin Yan looked at Liu Ruyan straight back, remembering that she had said in the video, There are few people in the company who can be trusted. He remembered that every time she worked overtime until late at night, she would force herself to tell him, "I am very happy today." He suddenly let go of her hand and turned to face everyone. "I know what everyone is questioning. Yes, I am a poor student and I haven't known you or Anne for a long time. But I know what kind of person she is." His voice echoed in the conference room, with the courage to burn his boats. "She will stay up late to revise 20 versions for an intern's creative plan. She will remember every employee's birthday and send handwritten greeting cards. She will auction off her most precious childhood toys at a charity dinner just to help children in mountainous areas. How could such a person abuse her power?" He turned to look at Liu Yuan, his eyes gentle and firm. "I believe in her, no matter what happens. I will stand by her side." Liu Yuan's eyelashes trembled violently, and her fingertips tightly grasped the corner of the table. Zhang Ming's face was livid, and he opened his mouth but had nothing to say. In the end, the voting results came out. Majority supported the prosecution. After the meeting, Yuan leaned back in the leather chair and covered her face with her hands. "Thank you." Her voice was muffled in her palms. "In fact, I had already mastered the evidence, but I'm just afraid of losing even the last bit of trust." Lin Yan finished for her, squatting down to look at her. "But you forgot that you still have me." She looked up at him, tears flashing in her eyes, but she still smiled and pinched his face. "Stupid, shouldn't you say? Don't be afraid. I'm here, at this time." He grabbed her hand, put it on his lips and kissed it lightly. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." The morning light outside the window gradually brightened, gilding her outline. Lin Yan remembered that he dreamed of her crying and saying, "No one believes me," last night. At this moment, he can finally hold her tightly in his arms and tell her with actions, "No matter what happens in the future, I will face it with you. You are not alone. Never." Yuan buried her face in his neck, and her voice was as light as a sigh. "Lin Yan, I seem to like you more." He smiled and drugged her hair. "Me too." The sun shone through the French windows, illuminating the financial statements on the conference table, and also illuminating the two hugging figures. In this workplace battlefield full of gunpowder, they used the purest trust to build an indestructible line of defense. And this may be the best form of love. Not icing on the cake, but sending charcoal in the snow, and the courage to see through each other's embarrassment and fragility, and still be willing to move forward hand in hand.